One of the great propulsive forces of the Manhattan Project was the enormous fear that the British and the Americans had that the Nazis would get the atomic bomb first. After all, fission had been discovered in Germany by Hans Strassmann, and before she was fleeing for her life, Lise Meitner. And their goal, the goal on the American and British side, was to get this bomb as quickly as possible. But part of that effort meant finding out exactly how far the Nazis had gotten. They had developed, as we know now, these enormously capable weapon systems of the rockets, the V-2s, the cruise missiles, the V-1s, swept-wing jets by the end of the war were in the air and fighting. The Nazis had a tremendously active weapons program of advanced technology. So it seemed entirely possible that they were building an atomic bomb. Some of the physicists there, like Hahn, were clearly still in Nazi Germany, so was Heisenberg. And between them and the many others that they'd recruited to the project, there was a real fear on the British and American side that they'd actually gotten ahead of the Americans. So a mission was formed, headed by a guy named Pash, who had been in counterintelligence in the United States and attached to the Manhattan Project, and Samuel Goudsmit, a physicist who had discovered electron spin and contributed enormously to our understanding of the atom. So they formed this group, and right behind, and sometimes even ahead of the advancing troops across Europe, they went to Italy, and then as troops fought their way across Europe, they would go from country to country, in Belgium, for example, and in France, and eventually in Germany, trying to figure out how far the Germans had gotten with chemical and biological weapons, but most importantly with the atomic bomb. Finally, the German scientists were discovered one by one. They had a list of people they were looking for. Some of them had disguised themselves as medics. Some of them were on the run. And they were captured, along with the documents and indeed the reactor that the Germans were working on. One of the pieces of that reactor was seized by Edwin Kemble, a spectroscopist and physicist at Harvard, and he brought it back. And that's what you see here is a piece of uranium from the reactor at Haigerloch in southern Germany. Uranium is quite an astonishingly heavy substance. So one of the first things you can do is to see an identically shaped block. This has got a little lead shield around it, but it doesn't even begin to tip the scales, and you have to keep adding weights, these kilogram weights and other weights, to even approach the weight of the uranium. So uranium is very dense. It's also, of course, radioactive, and you can see that, which is why I'm not going to touch it with my hands. And these uranium blocks were being used to try to develop to get the reactor to actually produce a sustained chain reaction. It never was a very sustained one. They got indications of a chain reaction earlier on in the war, and they really made no progress in any substantial way towards building an atomic bomb. The scale of Los Alamos was several $billion. It was the scale on the Nazi side of the V-2 program, the rocket program, which involved hundreds of thousands of people. So it was nowhere near that. But until fairly late in the war, when Goudsmit's team finally seized the scientists and they found the reactor and they really got a sense of the size of the effort, there was no way of knowing how far the Germans had gotten in the race for the atomic bomb.